Welcome to Spilling the TSA. I'm Bianca, your host. Now, as predicted, we have Aaron's Roots from Lex Libertas that has taken the New York Young Republican Club's members that are visiting here in South Africa and doing an Afrikaner persecution tour to the White Cross Monument. I covered that in my previous video, predicting that they will probably go to the White Cross Monument. And while standing amidst the white crosses in Limpopo, remember, please, this is important to highlight, is that this is a memorial. It is not an indication of all farm attacks. In fact, above the crosses that they initially had, they planted 2,000 crosses randomly in 2011. I assume for effect, but that doesn't matter if it's a memorial. It's a problem when you're using the White Cross Monument as statistics. It's not, okay? But while there, Aaron Roots is standing against the crosses and he is telling a montage of a horror story where he combines a number of farm attacks into one story, strips the individuals of their names, there's no dates provided, there's no indication of what happened in court regarding those cases, and generally strips victims of dignity. But he tells the story, they record it, and there's horrific, demonic, these are good Christian white people, that kind of thing, and this is what happened to them. Let's be very clear that this is not about rural safety. It's about actually exporting a narrative to a already charged environment in America, where there is this talking point of European civilization being under attack, and Aaron Roots is just feeding that particular international model. And the New York Young Republicans Club, it's a social club for Republicans, about 2,000 members, not really a major deal. They're MAGA. So he has discussed real details, gory details from 4 cases. And I think it's important to highlight what those 4 cases are so people know. If you are interested in looking into those cases, here's the details. So the first case he talks about is from 2000, and that is John and Bina Cross. Horrific farm attack, and both John and Bina were killed. This is the case where Aaron Roots focuses on telling people about a shower nozzle being stuffed down someone's throat and his insides burning. Now, in this case, that's there. He never gives John and Bina Cross's names. He kind of just glazes past it. Also doesn't say it happened in 2000. And he tries to make the argument that that particular murder was politically motivated because look at the torture, etc. However, what I should highlight is that their daughter, Lita Fourie, actually went to see the 2 perpetrators. They were arrested, incarcerated, and I think they got a 50-year sentence. And she went to see them in prison, and she asked some, it was an extremely emotional interview. She asked them, did her father fight back? And the answer was yes. She also asked them, why did they do that? They said they wanted money. Then she said, but why were you so violent? And they indicated that they were drunk. Okay. They do not exactly give we're pushing a political motivation here, but one can never say when it comes to motive, etc. But that is the first one. So from 2000, John and Bina Cross. Then he goes on to the next crime. And this is one that is often repeated. And when I hear it, I think, how do these families feel hearing this over and over again by these white men on international news, telling people that their family member was raped with a beer bottle and you look at it and you think, That was from 2009, and that was Alice and Helen Lauter. They were killed by their gardener, Shlongwane, and an accomplice. He was in charge with the murder, but he also got time for robbery. And the one part of that story, it's absolutely horrific. He did it was a frenzied kill, which also negates the so-called organized messaging that Roots keeps on putting out and others keep on putting out. These things are organized. No, they're not. What they don't tell you is the perpetrator in this particular case, actually 2 years prior to this violent attack on Alice and Helen, he had violently stabbed a black man to death with a beer bottle. That man is never spoken about by these particular people because that wouldn't fit into the narrative, because he's only supposed to be targeting white people. There is something related to this story, and we need to actually check, and I think it would be something that someone should put in a PIA request. A lot of times when this story is told, it is said that Hlongwane wrote in the Lotus blood on the wall, kill the bird or kill the farmer. But someone needs to actually look into that information. I'm not even sure if, because when you look at formal reporting, you can never find who actually made that statement. You know that certain activists pushed that statement. I've seen it in 1 or 2 articles, but it's never who said it. Did Creer, who was the policeman working on the case, actually indicate it or see it? Are there crime scene photos? That kind of thing. But we never questioned that narrative, and people run with it to show, that's why it's linked to Kill the Bird. So that was 2009. Then he talks about farmers being dragged behind vehicles, and there are 2 cases. There is, let me just see, I've got that. There is Jock de Gouveia from Heidelberg. He was shot during a farm attack and his body dragged behind his bakkie. The suspects were arrested and they were charged with robbery and murder. Then there was also Andre van der Merwe, Northwest. That was 2011. He was shot and dragged behind a vehicle, and attackers were caught and received life. Now, all of these are absolutely horrific crimes. All of the victims in these particular stories deserve their dignity, and if you want to discuss these cases, you should actually provide their names, provide the dates. Don't just only make them part of your gory horror story montage in front of the Witkruis monument. Because this is about narrative building, and it's about exporting a certain narrative. And I'm going to show you how this works. If I wanted to do this, if I wanted to build a narrative, and I do exactly what a number of people that are, in it for funding and getting international organizations involved in this particular issue, I'm going to show you how it looks. Stay with me. Remember, I'm not comfortable doing this, but I think we need to understand how this narrative works. Today you join me at the Black Cross Monument. The Black Cross Monument has been erected because of the gratuitous violence, the brutal murders and tortures of black people in South Africa by white people. There are, as you can see, thousands of crosses, and they represent those that lost their lives violently in South Africa. For instance, just a few examples. We have examples of 2 young black men, fathers in their communities, Christians, one a mechanic, that were placed in barrels and burnt alive. Their bodies were then the ashes were thrown in a plastic rubbish bag, thrown in a car and burnt out, and it was found under a bridge. This happened on a farm. This is what is happening to black people on farms. And then we have of the 2 mothers, pillar in their communities, only caregivers, 9 beautiful children amongst them, and they were shot and their bodies were just thrown to the pigs. One of the victims' eldest sons actually had to see his mom's body being consumed by the pigs. There were parts of the bodies missing. Then we have a farm worker who had on a regular basis gone and collected water from a furrow. And these 3 farmers were sitting there buying and decided they knew the farm worker, but today his fate was sealed. They beat him over hours and then threw his body on the back of a pickup truck and wanted to go and dispose of it. Fortunately, they got caught in a stop and go. Then we have another farm worker whose body was found, decomposing body was found tied to a chair with wire. He was full of burn marks. He was swollen from being beaten. This torture happened over days on a farm. And I must highlight is that these are not normal crimes. They're violent, they're savage, they're brutal. Items are used to beat these people, and it must be political. You can't explain it away as normal violent murders because nothing was stolen from these victims. And in most of these cases, and if you look at all these crosses, most of these cases, these bodies were only found because of luck. So they are disposed of as if they are rubbish. For instance, in the case of the 2 women whose bodies were thrown to the pigs, if it wasn't for the 3rd victim who actually got away, there would have been no way of actually finding these 2 women. If it wasn't for the stop and go, you wouldn't have found the farm worker who had been beaten for hours on this farm. It must be political, and people argue that it's not racially motivated. But how can you say it's not racially motivated when nothing was stolen? And when it comes to the political argument, come on, you have entire organizations in South Africa fighting to publicly display the old South African flag, under which crimes of humanity were actually committed against the majority of people in this country. So how can you say it's not politically motivated? Because of that, it's obvious that these violent, vicious, savage criminals feel that they can kill these black people, without any consequences. There's my narrative. Do you see what I did there? So I've given you enough gory details. Okay, I can give you much more gory details because none of those cases that I mentioned are untrue. A number of those cases are actually in court right now. I don't need to go decades back. I can actually deal with recent cases of violent murder and torture of people on farms. Okay? But the issue here is I've stripped the victims of their names. I haven't told you when this happened. I haven't told you that about the court cases, or that the perpetrators have been arrested, or that they might have a history of violence. I haven't told you any of that stuff. But what I have told you now is I've given you a picture, a horror montage. I've done it in front of the Black Cross Monument. And you will now run with that story. What are you going to say to people that start questioning that narrative? Well, it's very simple. How can you be so callous, cold, immoral? How can you side with the deniers of black farm murders and not the victims? You see, that's the line. And I just wanted to tell you is that it's time that we stop allowing a certain group of people that actually build momentum and emotion and play on your emotion for fundraising and for their ideological motives. Stop allowing them to emotionally blackmail you. They are the ones that are morally bankrupt, mercenary, and they do not care about victims. They show so little regard for victims that they strip them of their identities. Stop falling for the narrative. Start asking the questions out of respect for the victims, out of respect for their dignity, not for these people. But you see, anyone can do it. We need to recognize it's getting done and not fight back against it with, oh yeah, but what about this? No. Keep them honest. Push them on their stories. And There is nothing wrong with discussing these cases, but don't discuss them and throw them all together in your little horror montage for funding or for a white civilization is under attack narrative. Let's treat people with dignity. Also, another thing is the saddest thing about that entire show and tell from a lot of these Afrikaner persecution narrative tour guides is that it doesn't do anything for victims. It doesn't do anything for their families. It just re-traumatizes them again. And it doesn't do anything about the safety of South Africans. And all of us are at risk. South Africa has an issue with violent crime. Anyway, thank you for joining me at Spilling the TSA, and I hope you enjoyed this episode and that you will now recognize the tactic.